The rain was coming down in sheets as I drove home, the wipers on my old Volvo working overtime. I was tired, bone tired, but it was a good tired. Another successful surgery completed, another life saved. Being a neurosurgeon at St. Jude's in Atlanta was demanding, but it was my calling. I glanced at the clock, 6:47 p.m. Cassidy would be home by now, probably starting dinner. Thinking of her warm smile and the smell of whatever culinary masterpiece she was whipping up always gave me a boost. We'd been married for 17 years, a good run, a happy run, or so I thought. I pulled into the driveway of our house in Buckhead, the sprawling two-story colonial that we'd bought after years of saving. The lights were on, casting a warm glow onto the wet lawn. I killed the engine, grabbed my briefcase, and headed inside. "Cassidy, I'm home," I called out, dropping my briefcase by the door. No answer. That was odd. Usually she'd be right there greeting me with a kiss and a rundown of her day. "Cassidy," I called again, my voice a little louder this time. Still nothing. I walked into the kitchen. Empty. The stove was cold, no sign of any cooking happening. A note was stuck to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a slice of pizza. "Gone to see Mom, back late. Love, Cassidy." I frowned. Her mother lived in Asheville, North Carolina, a good 3-hour drive. Cassidy hadn't mentioned anything about going to see her, and why wouldn't she call? I pulled out my phone and dialed her number. It went straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's me, just wondering where you are. Give me a call when you get a chance." I shrugged it off. Maybe it was a spur-of-the-moment thing. Maybe her mother wasn't feeling well. I decided to order takeout and catch up on some reading. I spent the evening lost in a medical journal, trying not to think about the empty seat across from me at the dinner table. Cassidy finally came home around 1:00 a.m. I was asleep on the couch, the journal open on my chest. I woke with a start as I heard the door open and close. "Titus, what are you doing sleeping down here?" she asked, her voice a little too bright, a little too cheerful. "Waiting for you," I said, sitting up and rubbing my eyes. "Where were you? I thought you went to see your mother." Her smile faltered for a split second, then recovered. "I did, I stayed longer than I expected. We had a lot to talk about. You could have called," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "I was worried. I'm sorry," she said, avoiding my gaze. "My phone died. I didn't want to wake you up when I got back, so I just left a note and went to bed." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But something felt off. The way she was acting, the way she wouldn't look me in the eye. It was like she was hiding something. I pushed it aside. I loved her and I trusted her. Or I wanted to trust her. The next few weeks were a blur of work, family obligations, and a growing sense of unease. Cassidy was distant, preoccupied. She was always on her phone, texting someone. When I asked her who she was talking to, she'd brush it off, saying it was just a friend or a colleague from the law firm where she worked as a paralegal. One evening, I came home early from the hospital. A surgery had been canceled at the last minute, and I decided to surprise Cassidy with dinner. I walked in the front door, calling her name. No answer. I headed to the kitchen, and that's when I heard it. A muffled sound coming from our bedroom. A sound that made my blood run cold. Moaning. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't want to believe what I was hearing. I couldn't believe it. But the sounds continued, growing louder, more insistent. I slowly walked towards the bedroom door, my hand trembling as I reached for the knob. I pushed the door open. The scene that greeted me was like a punch to the gut. Cassidy was in our bed, naked, with another man. It was Lucian, our next-door neighbor. A man I considered a friend. A man who had been to our house countless times, who had shared meals with us, who had laughed with us. Time seemed to slow down. I stood there, paralyzed, unable to speak, unable to move. Cassidy and Lucian both froze, their eyes wide with shock and horror. The silence in the room was deafening. Finally, Cassidy spoke. "Titus, I can explain," she stammered, pulling the sheets up to cover herself. "Explain," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Explain what?" "Explain how you could do this to me, to us." Lucian, to his credit, looked ashamed. He scrambled out of bed, grabbed his clothes, and mumbled an apology before hurrying out of the room. I turned my attention back to Cassidy. "How long?" I asked, my voice shaking with rage and hurt. "How long has this been going on?" She started to cry. "It just happened," she said, her voice trembling. "It didn't mean anything." "Mean anything?" I repeated, incredulous. You were just having sex with my neighbor in our bed and it didn't mean anything, I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry, I don't know what came over me. I couldn't stand to look at her. I turned and walked out of the room, out of the house, out into the pouring rain. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay there. I drove aimlessly for hours, the rain mirroring the tears streaming down my face. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions: shock, disbelief, anger, betrayal. How could she do this to me? How could she throw away everything we had built together? I ended up at a seedy motel on the outskirts of town. I checked in, went to my room, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring blankly at the wall. I didn't sleep. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Cassidy and Lucian in our bed. The image was seared into my brain, a constant reminder of her betrayal. The next morning, I went back to the house. Cassidy was still there, waiting for me. She looked terrible, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "Titus, please," she said, reaching out to me. "Let me explain. Let me make it right." "There's nothing to explain," I said, my voice cold and flat. "It's over, Cassidy. I want a divorce." She burst into tears again. "No, please don't do this. I love you. I made a mistake. I promise it will never happen again." "I don't believe you," I said. "And even if I did, I could never trust you again. The trust is gone, Cassidy. You destroyed it." I spent the next few days packing my things and moving into a small apartment downtown. The divorce proceedings were swift and brutal. Cassidy fought me every step of the way, but I was determined to get out of that marriage as quickly as possible. I couldn't bear to be around her, to see her face, to hear her voice. As the divorce moved forward, more details of Cassidy's affair with Lucian surfaced. It turned out that it had been going on for months. They had been meeting at hotels, at Lucian's house when his wife was out of town, even in our own house when I was at work. The betrayal was even deeper than I had initially imagined. I also discovered that Lucian wasn't the only man Cassidy had been seeing. She had a string of affairs over the past few years, each one carefully hidden from me. I was devastated. I had been so blind, so trusting. I had thought we had a perfect marriage, but it was all a lie. I confronted Lucian's wife, Eamon, with what I knew. She was heartbroken but not surprised. She had suspected something was going on between Cassidy and Lucian for a while, but she hadn't been able to prove it. She thanked me for telling her the truth. Eamon and I became friends. We bonded over our shared experience of betrayal. We spent hours talking, sharing our pain and supporting each other. We helped each other through the difficult process of divorce and rebuilding our lives. One day, Eamon told me something that made my blood boil. She had overheard Lucian bragging to a friend about how he had manipulated Cassidy into having an affair with him. He said he had done it because he was jealous of our success, of our happy marriage. He wanted to destroy what we had. I was furious. Lucian hadn't just betrayed me, he had deliberately set out to ruin my life. I decided to take action. I gathered all the evidence I had of his manipulation and deceit, and I went to the police. I filed a report accusing him of harassment and emotional distress. The police investigated and they found enough evidence to charge Lucian with several crimes. He was arrested and taken into custody. Cassidy, horrified by what Lucian had done, cooperated with the police. She testified against him in court. Lucian was convicted and sentenced to several years in prison. His life was ruined. He lost his job, his wife, and his freedom. He paid the price for his betrayal. Cassidy, on the other hand, got off relatively easy. She lost her marriage, her reputation, and the respect of her friends and family. But she was able to move on with her life. She eventually found another job and started a new relationship. As for me, I was left with the scars of betrayal. It took me a long time to heal, to trust again. But with the help of Eamon, I was able to move forward. We grew closer over time, and eventually we fell in love. We remarried a year later. I learned a valuable lesson from my experience with Cassidy. I learned that people are not always who they seem to be. I learned that trust is a precious thing, and it should be given cautiously. And I learned that even after the most devastating betrayal, it is possible to find love and happiness again. This story is about the devastating impact of betrayal and the long road to recovery. It's about the pain of infidelity, the anger of betrayal, and the struggle to forgive. It's also about the power of resilience, the importance of friendship, and the possibility of finding love again after heartbreak. Cheating can destroy lives, but it doesn't have to be the end of the story. Sometimes it can be the beginning of a new chapter. Remember, betrayal can wound deeply, but it doesn't define you. Stay strong, friends.